They looked perfect. You know the type. Young, smiling, church-going, the kind of couple people point at and say, that's what it's supposed to look like. New here? Don't forget to subscribe and tap the bell so you won't miss any of our latest videos. Their love story? Straight out of a faith-based romance. Chance meetings in college, long conversations about God, late-night prayers, big dreams about purpose and destiny. But here's the thing about perfect pictures. You never see what's happening just outside the frame. Behind the unity, there were rules. Unspoken ones. Strange ones. Prophetic expectations, private rituals, boundaries that started to blur. And then, suddenly, it all collapsed, leaving one question hanging in the air. What happens when faith stops being shared and starts being controlled? This is the story of Bethany Deon and Tyler Deon, and how belief, power, and obsession slowly tangled together until there was no way out. Bethany Deon was born and raised in Texas, one of 5 kids in a tight-knit Christian family. Faith wasn't just something they practiced, it was the air they breathed. Her parents believed in structure, in discipline, in raising children who feared God and respected authority. And Bethany? She absorbed it all. She was calm, serious, reserved. While other kids were outside messing around, Bethany was inside with a book. By 13, she'd torn through nearly all of Charles Dickens. Not skimmed, not read for school, studied. She could break down themes and symbolism like someone twice her age. Teachers noticed. Adults noticed. But reading wasn't enough. She wrote. Pages and pages. Thoughts about faith, about purpose, about longing. She kept a blog filled with essays that felt older than she was, layered with irony, depth, and quiet intensity. By her early 20s, she almost had 200 pages of writing stacked up. Not just talent, hunger. She wanted to teach one day, university level. She wanted to write books that mattered, words that left a mark. But more than that, she wanted a husband, a home in nature, kids, a peaceful, God-centered life. And she didn't just hope for it, she prepared for it. Bethany prayed regularly for her future spouse. She even wrote letters to him, letters he'd one day read, letters filled with promises of loyalty, faith, and partnership. She believed God would deliver the right man. She had no idea how literal that belief would become. Tyler Deon was born in 1985 into a deeply religious family. From early on, he stood out. He was musical, charismatic, dramatic in the way that makes people lean in when he talks. But there was something else there too, something intense. He loved fantasy worlds, Chronicles of Narnia, Harry Potter, apocalyptic scripture, end times prophecy, stories about chosen ones. Over time, those stories didn't just entertain him, they shaped him. He didn't just admire heroes, he started to see himself as one. Tyler believed he was set apart, destined for something bigger, something spiritual, something most people couldn't understand. In 2005, he enrolled at Southwestern University in Georgetown, Texas, a school known for academics and strong Christian culture. And that's where things really started to take form. Tyler didn't blend in, he dominated rooms. He led worship events, jumped into theological debates, spoke with this fiery conviction that made people feel like they were missing something if they disagreed. But he also criticized the campus prayer groups, said they lacked depth, said they were spiritually shallow. According to Tyler, most people were just playing church. He wanted something deeper, something real, something prophetic. And that's when Bethany noticed him. She was drawn to his intensity, his confidence, his certainty, the way he spoke about destiny like it was a schedule already written. For a girl who had spent her whole life praying for a spiritually strong husband, Tyler felt like an answered prayer. He talked about faith like it was alive, about calling, about higher purpose, about visions. Bethany started attending his gatherings. At first it was just curiosity, then admiration, then something more. Slowly, almost without realizing it, she stopped seeing Tyler as just a passionate student. She began to see him as her spiritual leader. And here's where it gets complicated. Because when love mixes with faith, and faith mixes with power, the lines get blurry fast. What starts as devotion can turn into dependency. What feels like guidance can become control. And when one person believes they're chosen, everyone else either follows or gets left behind. And Bethany, she was all in. Summer 2007. A crowded bookstore, midnight release, kids in wizard robes, cameras flashing. Tyler standing in line for the new Harry Potter book, and that's when he says it happened. Not in a church, not during prayer, not in some quiet chapel, in line for a fantasy novel. July 21st. He later called it a vision, a divine download. He said God spoke to him right there, told him he was chosen to shift the spiritual climate of the entire university, that he was supposed to gather people, build a circle, raise up warriors whose prayers could change the future. Not just of campus, of the world. And guess who made the list? Bethany. From that point on, things accelerated. Tyler didn't just enjoy fantasy stories anymore, he started weaving himself into them. Chronicles of Narnia, ordinary people becoming warriors in a cosmic battle. Harry Potter, light versus darkness, chosen ones, destiny. Rick Joyner's The Final Quest, proof in Tyler's mind that modern-day prophets still existed, and somehow he was one of them. Bethany believed him. Not blindly, not at first, but she saw how he connected pop culture with scripture, how he made prophecy feel personal, urgent, alive. For her, joining his inner circle didn't feel reckless. It felt like stepping into purpose. Like all those letters she wrote to her future husband. Like all those prayers. Maybe this was the answer. By July 2009, graduation came. Most students were polishing resumes, sending applications, planning careers. Tyler had a different plan. He told the group they weren't supposed to scatter. They were supposed to move together. Kansas City. No backup plan, no corporate ladder, no normal future, just the mission. Bethany went with them. Of course she did. She didn't see it as sacrifice. She saw it as destiny unfolding. Kansas City wasn't random. They were heading toward the International House of Prayer, IHOP KC, founded by Pastor Mike Bickle, a place known for 24/7 prayer, end times theology, apocalyptic focus. For Tyler, it wasn't just an internship opportunity. It was confirmation, proof that his vision lined up with something bigger. But here's what's interesting. He didn't go there to follow. He went there to launch. That's when the community formed. That's what they called themselves. Simple, clean, almost harmless sounding. They settled in a quiet suburb near Grandview, Missouri. Peaceful streets, normal houses. Inside, a completely different world. Men lived in one house, women in another. Bethany was placed in the women's house, and from day one, rules were tight. Prayer schedules mapped out by the hour. Household decisions filtered through Tyler. Personal choices? Practically gone. If you stepped outside his directives, it wasn't disagreement, it was disobedience. And disobedience wasn't just social, it was spiritual failure. Then came one of his boldest commands: cut off your families. He said relatives could interfere with God's plan, that emotional ties would weaken their spiritual calling. So people started pulling away. Phone calls got shorter. Visits stopped. Holidays passed without contact. Bethany, who had grown up in a close, loving family, slowly drifted from them. Not overnight, but little by little. Isolation doesn't happen with a slam. It happens with a whisper. Then Tyler went after their futures. Careers? Irrelevant. Members who once dreamed of medicine, science, art, told to drop it. Instead, they worked retail, service jobs, low-wage shifts. Every paycheck went into a shared communal fund. Tyler controlled it, and he didn't work. He said his job was spiritual leadership, full-time, untouchable. But the real power move, marriage prophecies. Tyler claimed God revealed to him who was meant to be with whom. He decided when relationships started, when they ended. Romance wasn't personal anymore. It was scheduled, approved, or shut down. And if you questioned it, you weren't doubting Tyler, you were doubting God. Bethany, who once prayed for her future husband and wrote him letters, now watched her own romantic future get filtered through someone else's revelations. What felt like sacred guidance was starting to look a lot like control. Then came the warning sign nobody could ignore. Fall 2010. Bo Harrington. Tyler labeled him rebellious. That was the word, rebellious. Bo was placed in isolation. 8 months.
Inside the men's house, no communication, no normal interaction. Cut off. 8 months is a long time, long enough to break someone down. And here's the part that should have scared everyone. The group didn't leave. They stayed. Because by then, the rules weren't just rules, they were survival. And Tyler, he wasn't just a leader anymore. He was the lens through which reality was interpreted. And once someone controls the lens, they control what you see. The question wasn't whether the system was dangerous. The question was, how far would it go? Spring 2011. That's when IHOP leadership finally got wind of what was going on inside Tyler's little circle. 8 months. That's how long Bo Harrington had been isolated before anyone stepped in. When leadership found out, they pushed for his release, told Tyler to reintegrate him, more humane conditions, they said. But by then, the damage was done. Because the group wasn't just a campus Bible study anymore. It had hardened. What started as a prayer circle had evolved into a closed system, layered hierarchy, inner circles, unspoken ranks. Officially, they were still connected to IHOP KC. Unofficially, Tyler ran the show. Every decision, every dollar, every relationship. And the deeper they settled into Kansas City, the stranger things got. On the outside, Tyler played the part well. Spiritual mentor, disciplined, morally strict, passionate about purity. But inside the community, it was complicated, messy, contradictory. Take his relationship with Bethany. It was intense, emotional, symbolic, loaded with meaning. But physically, nothing. They didn't date like normal couples. No holding hands, no kisses, no closeness. Instead, they baked bread together. Bread. They called it sacred, a symbol of unity, preparation for marriage. But that was it. No intimacy, no romance, just rituals. For Bethany, this became a quiet ache. She had dreamed of a loving partnership, warmth, connection, a real marriage. Instead, she got symbolism. Tyler framed it as spiritual discipline. She tried to believe that.
But here's where things shift. Because while Bethany was waiting for sacred timing, there was another reality unfolding. Tyler was secretly engaging in intimate relationships with several men inside the group. Only a few knew. It was never openly discussed. And publicly, he preached hard against same-sex relationships, called them sinful, condemned them. The hypocrisy wasn't subtle. It was massive. But inside a closed system, contradictions don't explode. They get explained away. Then came something called group embraces. Tyler described them as spiritual exercises, prolonged physical contact meant to create supernatural unity. He said it built harmony, broke down pride, connected souls. In practice, it blurred every boundary, emotional, physical, psychological, and it always centered around him. These rituals did two things at once. They reinforced his authority under the label of spiritual discipline, and they satisfied personal desires without public exposure. The members, conditioned to see him as chosen, accepted it, rarely questioned it, because when your leader claims God backs every move, doubt feels like rebellion. Bethany had her own explanation. She believed they were destined for marriage, so she told herself the lack of intimacy was sacrifice, a higher calling, a test of purity. Her elevated status inside the group helped reinforce that belief. If Tyler treated her differently, it must mean she was set apart, special. But to Tyler, the relationship served another purpose. It made him look stable, moral, heterosexual, leader material. He was building an image, and Bethany was part of the architecture. February 2012, Tyler proposed, framed it as the fulfillment of prophecy, years of prayer, divine timing. For Bethany, it felt like finally exhaling. Everything she'd prayed for, coming together. Inside the community, the engagement wasn't romantic, it was strategic, another piece of the mission. Wedding planning became a group effort, Tyler leading, community members organizing, family input, minimal. August 18th, 2012, wedding day. Heavy religious tone, prayer-focused, mission-centered. Bethany's family showed up, but many later said they felt like guests at someone else's event. Tyler was surrounded by his inner circle. The ceremony felt more like a spiritual assembly than a celebration.
One of Bethany's close friends admitted later she had a terrible gut feeling, said something felt off. No joy, just tension. Even during the vows, the language focused on service, calling, purpose. Very little about love, very little about partnership. Tyler stayed distant, formal, controlled, no affection, even on the wedding day. He said it was important to maintain spiritual focus. Think about that. On your wedding day. Then came the honeymoon, or at least that's what it was supposed to be. Tyler kept the destination secret. Bethany didn't even know where they were going until they were at the airport. Costa Rica. Surprise. To an outsider, it might sound romantic, but in a relationship built on secrecy, control, and symbolism, surprises hit different. And the real question wasn't where they were flying, it was this: what happens when the fantasy finally meets reality? Because up until now, their marriage had been an idea, a prophecy, a mission. But once the doors closed and the plane took off, there was no community, no audience, no hierarchy, just the two of them, and all the contradictions they'd been avoiding. Costa Rica was supposed to be the beginning. New country, new marriage, fresh start. At first, it looked normal. They unpacked, talked about sightseeing, made casual plans, spoke about their future like any newly married couple would. But every time Bethany tried to lean in, literally lean in, she hit a wall. A hug, cut short. A kiss, interrupted. Any attempt to closeness met with irritation. Tyler said physical intimacy distracted from their higher purpose, said it interfered with his spiritual sensitivity. Their wedding night? It never happened. Let that sit there for a second. For Bethany, it was a shock she couldn't quite process. She tried to talk about it, asked gently for clarity, even suggested they put theology aside and just enjoy being husband and wife. Tyler responded with vague answers, changed the subject, shut down emotionally. Sometimes he'd leave her alone for hours. So she read. She picked up the Twilight series and disappeared into it, because it wasn't profound, but it was something, a distraction, a way to fill the silence when her brand new husband wouldn't touch her. By the time they flew home, the pictures told one story. Smiles, vacation snapshots, polite recaps. But inside, something had cracked. The marriage that was supposed to launch her dream life had begun with rejection, and that rejection didn't fade. It grew. Back in Kansas City, stability never showed up. Bethany technically moved into Tyler's basement room, but she barely stayed there. More and more, she drifted back to the women's house, sometimes for days at a time. Her roommates noticed the anxiety, the exhaustion, the low mood. When they asked what was wrong, she brushed it off, said she needed space, said she felt overwhelmed, too controlled. Sleep left her. Nights were restless. Days were heavy. On the rare occasions she stayed with Tyler, she'd toss and turn, unable to settle. He'd grow frustrated, annoyed at being kept awake. Comfort wasn't happening. Connection wasn't happening. During the day, she withdrew, avoided future talk, avoided eye contact, avoided anything that required hope. People around them started to feel the tension. Something wasn't right.
October 23rd, 2012. It escalated. Tyler walked into the kitchen and found Bethany holding a mug. Inside it, windshield wiper fluid. He took it from her and called emergency services. When officers arrived, Bethany said something that chilled everyone in the room. It's easier to die than to change. She was taken for psychiatric evaluation at Truman Medical Center. There, she explained that Tyler's teachings had convinced her she was spiritually condemned, that she was beyond saving, that her soul was already lost. When asked if she would try to harm herself again, she said yes. She refused medication, refused antidepressants. 2 days later, despite the risk, she was discharged. Tyler told staff it was too soon. His concern was noted, but she was released anyway. After that, the decline sped up. Sleepless nights intensified. Anxiety spiked. Then came stretches of deep apathy. She started talking about having a broken soul, about being on a path to destruction. Conversations became short, flat, one-word replies. If friends brought up work, writing, family, she went quiet. She kept returning to the women's house, saying she needed peace. From the outside, it was a steep drop. Isolation, exhaustion, refusal of treatment, constant talk of self-harm. She described her state as religious fatalism. She believed her fate was sealed, unchangeable. By the end of October, she looked drained, hollow, and no one had a clear plan to help her. Then Tyler made a move that changed everything. After Bethany came home from the hospital, he set a new rule for the community. No one was to reach out to her. No one was to offer support. He said helping her only fed selfishness. And when Tyler spoke, people listened. Communication stopped. If Bethany tried to engage, responses were minimal, formal, distant. The isolation became complete. October 29th. Another group meeting. Tyler spoke about renouncing selfishness for the mission. His tone was sharp, almost accusatory. He never said her name. He didn't have to. Bethany sat off to the side, silent. Afterward, no one approached her. Isolation wasn't implied anymore. It was real. October 30th. Bethany visited the women's house one more time. She left some belongings behind, said goodbye. When someone asked about work or plans, she said, "I don't know." Shortly after, she left. No texts, no calls, no stops at the men's house. By evening, she hadn't returned. But no alarm went up. Tyler had said she needed to walk her path alone, so they let her. That was the last time anyone from the group saw her alive. Late that night, the Jackson County Sheriff's Office received a call. A suspicious vehicle parked at Longview Recreation Area. A beige minivan sitting in a dark, remote section of the lot near the tree line. It had been there a while. A patrol unit arrived around 9:40 p.m. The vehicle was registered to Bethany Deon. Locked from the inside. Windows rolled up. No damage. Through the glass, officers could see someone in the back. They forced entry. Bethany was in the third row. A white plastic bag over her head, tied at the neck. On the floor, 2 bottles of Tylenol PM. One empty, one unopened. On the seat in front of her, a handwritten note. Inside the van, everything was orderly. Her belongings neatly placed up front. No signs of struggle, no blood, no visible injuries. Initial assessment? It looked like she had taken her own life. The note was heavy with religious language. She wrote about being doomed, about eternal punishment, about seeing no way out. But investigators noticed something strange. The handwriting didn't match her usual style. Bethany had always written in neat, fluid script. This note was shaky, uneven. Friends and family said the tone felt different too. The paper went to handwriting analysis. Meanwhile, forensic teams dusted the van. Door handles, steering wheel, seat belts. No foreign DNA, no unknown fingerprints. Autopsy results came back. Asphyxiation combined with a high level of Tylenol PM. The medical examiner ruled it intentional. Days later, handwriting experts confirmed the note was hers. They suggested the unusual script could be due to extreme emotional distress and exhaustion. The idea of a forged letter was ruled out. With the evidence combined, investigators concluded Bethany had ended her own life. The van was towed, her body transported to the county morgue. Case closed.
at least officially. But for those who knew the inner workings of the community, the questions didn't go away. Because sometimes the hardest part isn't proving how someone died. It's understanding everything that led them there. The call to Bethany's family was brief, clinical, devastating. To the outside world, the story made sense. A fragile young woman, religious guilt, isolation, a tragic decision made alone in a parked van. Case closed. At least, that's how it looked. Until November 9th, 2012. That's when everything flipped. A man named Micah Moore walked into the Grandview Police Department. He wasn't alone. 2 leaders from the International House of Prayer came with him. He approached the desk officer and said he needed to talk about Bethany's case. Then he said 4 words that stopped the room cold. I did it. Detectives were notified immediately. Moore was taken to an interview room. A court-appointed attorney was assigned. The recording started. At first, he could barely get the words out. He was tense, fragmented, kept asking for water. Then the story started spilling out. And it was nothing like the official narrative. Moore claimed that for months before Bethany's death, men from the group's house were secretly drugging her. A powerful antipsychotic. Liquid form. He said they would slip it to her until she lost consciousness. And while she was unconscious, Moore alleged several men sexually assaulted her. He claimed the acts were recorded on his iPad. He said some of the participants even wrote poems about what they'd done. And Tyler? Moore said he knew. Not only knew, but framed it as a spiritual experience. A religious experience. Then Moore dropped the next bomb. He said Bethany had recently started seeing a therapist. That she was in a position to talk. To expose everything. And according to Moore, the group panicked. He told investigators that Tyler said, "This has to be done." Moore interpreted that as a direct order. Eliminate her before she could speak. Before the scandal exploded. Before prison became real. According to Moore's confession, on the morning of October 30th, he met Bethany at Longview Lake. He said he gave her a liquid substance, then placed a plastic bag over her head, held it there until she stopped breathing. Afterward, he staged the scene, placed 2 bottles of Tylenol PM inside the van, left a note, made it look like suicide. He also claimed that just days earlier, Tyler had described a dream where he killed his wife by suffocation. Moore said he took that as confirmation. A signal. The men were scared of exposure. Scared of prison. Scared of public shame. They believed they were protecting the mission. Protecting their brothers.
Detectives pressed him hard. Times, locations, where did the drugs come from, where did he get the bag, who else was physically present. Moore insisted he acted alone, but he said Tyler and several others knew. He told police the iPad with recordings was still at the house. That was enough. The Jackson County Prosecutor's Office was notified immediately. Bethany's funeral was delayed. Her body was held for a second autopsy. The case was reclassified from suicide to possible homicide. Search warrants were issued. The group's house, Moore's belongings, electronics. IHOP leaders who accompanied Moore were questioned as witnesses. And just like that, the story went national. By the next morning, headlines were everywhere. Cult killing, sex scandal, religious leader under scrutiny. News vans parked outside the Grandview Police Department. Reporters knocked on doors in quiet neighborhoods. Cameras waited outside houses in Kansas City. The focus wasn't just on Moore's confession, it was on Tyler and his connection to IHOP KC. IHOP moved fast. They released a public statement denying any cult-like behavior or hidden practices. They said Tyler's group operated independently, that his methods were not aligned with their doctrine. Tyler was removed from all IHOP programs, banned from facilities. Public distancing became immediate and permanent. Then, parents started arriving. Mothers, fathers, relatives. They drove to Kansas City in waves. Moving vans pulled up to the rented houses in Grandview, suitcases loaded, boxes carried out. Cars shuttled young members to airports and bus stations. Some left immediately. Others stayed just long enough to speak with police. Investigators interviewed everyone. Names, dates, who lived where, who had access to rooms, who handled electronics. The community that once felt sealed shut, it was unraveling in plain sight. November 14, 2012, the Jackson County prosecutor formally charged Micah Moore with first-degree murder. For the media, that was validation. This wasn't just a confession from a troubled young man. It was serious enough to prosecute. And now the question shifted. If Moore was telling the truth, how deep did this go? And if he wasn't, why confess to something this massive? Because one thing was clear. The simple story of a lonely suicide, it was gone. Now there were layers, secrets, allegations, and a leader whose shadow stretched over all of it. And the investigation was just getting started. By the end of that week, the houses were ghost towns. The same rooms that once echoed with late-night worship sessions and whispered accountability talks were suddenly stripped bare. Mattresses gone, closets emptied, walls marked where pictures used to hang. Moving vans rolled in and out of Grandview like it was some kind of quiet evacuation. Parents had shown up fast, some furious, some confused, all shaken. They took their kids home, packed their bags, pulled them out of what now looked to outsiders like something way darker than a tight-knit faith circle. And here's the thing, once those former members got home, once they had space to breathe, that's when it hit them. The pressure, the control, the constant spiritual guilt. It hadn't felt extreme at the time. It felt normal until it didn't. Public reaction was split straight down the middle. Some people were like, lock 'em all up, every last one. Others asked harder questions. How much responsibility does a larger religious organization carry when smaller groups operate alongside it but make their own rules? Where does oversight end and denial begin? And just when it seemed like the case couldn't get more complicated, Micah Moore took it all back. He retracted his confession, just like that. Now investigators had a bigger problem than before. Was this a cult killing? Or was it a false confession wrapped in paranoia and pressure? So they went back to the beginning, and this time they checked everything. The first crack in Moore's story came from a simple detail. He had told detectives Bethany was found in the front seat of the van, but official reports said something different. She was in the third row. That's not a minor mix-up. That's not, I forgot. That's a red flag. If he staged the scene, how did he get the most basic detail wrong? Then detectives dug into his alibi. College attendance records, bank transactions, time-stamped purchases. On the morning Bethany died, Moore was in class. He used his debit card at local businesses during the exact window he claimed to be at Longview Lake. Those digital receipts, they don't lie, and they placed him nowhere near the scene. That was a rock-solid alibi. Next up, toxicology. If Bethany had been secretly drugged for months with a powerful antipsychotic, it would show up. It didn't. Her blood contained only Tylenol PM, no trace of any antipsychotic medication, no sedatives beyond what was in the over-the-counter pills, which meant Moore's claim that she'd been dosed regularly didn't hold up. Then came the medical exam. Moore had described repeated sexual assaults, said there were recordings, said there were multiple men involved, but the examiners found no trauma, no injuries, no signs of sexual contact. In fact, their conclusion was direct and clinical. Bethany had remained a virgin. That finding alone dismantled the core of Moore's allegations. What about the iPad? The one he claimed held recordings of assaults. Forensic analysts combed through it. Every folder, every hidden file, every deleted fragment. Nothing. No videos, no metadata, no traces of anything being erased. Digital forensics confirmed it had never been used the way Moore described.
Then came the Walmart footage. Investigators pulled security video from the store, and there she was. Bethany. Alone. purchasing the bottles of Tylenol PM herself. Paid with her own card. The packaging matched exactly what was found in the van. That moment on camera undercut another major piece of Moore's story. She wasn't handed the pills, she bought them. One by one, the dramatic claims collapsed under hard evidence. The case circled back to its original conclusion. Bethany had taken her own life. Moore's confession was ruled unreliable, unsupported. In October 2014, nearly 2 years later, the Jackson County prosecutor formally dropped all charges against him. The investigation determined his confession did not align with the facts, and Bethany's death was reclassified, again, as self-harm. Experts later weighed in. Legal analysts said the case showed how powerful psychological environments can distort reality. Mental health professionals noted Moore appeared deeply traumatized, possibly another casualty of the same intense insular culture. In other words, he may not have been a killer, but he wasn't untouched by the system either. For Bethany's family, the outcome felt like a punch to the gut. They never agreed with closing the case without holding Tyler accountable. In their eyes, this wasn't just about a criminal act. It was about atmosphere, control, isolation, spiritual manipulation. They believed Tyler created an environment that pushed Bethany to the edge, even if it didn't meet the legal standard for murder. To them, he remained the central figure. Tyler Deon publicly denied ever ordering harm, denied violence, denied instructing anyone to kill his wife. The only thing he admitted, underestimating her suffering, failing to see how deep her crisis had become. To Bethany's family and to former members, that sounded like damage control, like sidestepping the weight of what had happened. After the charges were dropped, Micah Moore went back to Texas. He cut ties with the group, kept a low profile, stayed under medical supervision due to psychological strain and the national spotlight that had turned him into a headline overnight. He disappeared from public view. Officially, the case is closed. Bethany took her own life. That's the record. But emotionally, for the people closest to her, it's not that simple. Her death, to them, can't be separated from the belief system that surrounded her, the constant pressure, the rigid hierarchy, the unchallenged authority. Tyler walked away without criminal charges, but not without consequence. He was expelled from the religious community, his reputation shattered, his inner circle dissolved. Still, for some, that wasn't enough. This case is a hard reminder of something uncomfortable. Closed groups with authoritarian structures can warp reality. Isolation can amplify despair. Blind obedience can silence doubt. And sometimes the damage doesn't show up in fingerprints or toxicology reports. Sometimes it shows up in atmosphere, in influence, in the slow erosion of someone's autonomy. Bethany's story doesn't end cleanly. It lingers. It raises questions about power, accountability, and how far influence can stretch before it becomes something dangerous. And even now, years later, one question still echoes. If no one pulled the trigger, who, if anyone, pulled the strings?